Imagine this. It's the late 1700s, and across the Atlantic, 13 colonies are rising in rebellion. Pamphlets, speeches, protests all, aiming their fury at one man, King George III. He's painted as a tyrant, a power-hungry monarch, obsessed with crushing freedom. That's the version you learned in school. The villain of the American Revolution. But what if I told you that version isn't the whole story? That the man Americans love to hate was actually far stranger, more complicated, and even at times tragically human. Let's rewind. George III never once set foot in America. Not a single day. Yet he was obsessed with the colonies. Reports, letters, trade updates. He devoured them all. He wanted to know how many barrels of tobacco left Virginia, how much rum flowed from New England, even the tiniest details of colonial trade. Picture this. While colonists imagined a king with blood on his hands, plotting their downfall, George was in London, hunched over stacks of reports, tracking exports like some obsessed accountant. And then there's the madness. That title, Mad King George, it sticks. But do you know what really happened? Witnesses described him talking until foam spilled from his lips. His letters stretched into 400-word sentences, without a single pause. He would argue with no one in particular, and once shook hands with a tree, believing it to be a person. Sounds insane, right? But modern science suggests something different. Maybe it wasn't madness at all. Some experts say it was porphyria, rare blood disorder that causes hallucinations and fits. Others believe it might have been bipolar disorder, which raises a haunting question. Did America declare independence at the exact moment Britain's king was collapsing under a hidden illness? Did history bend, not because of politics, but because of a man's untreated condition? And here's where it gets darker. When Britain lost the colonies, it nearly destroyed George III. Ministers described him in tears, whispering, "I have lost the colonies forever." Behind closed doors, he even considered abdicating, walking away from the throne. Imagine that. The so-called tyrant Americans thought would cling to power at any cost, was ready to surrender it all. But here's the twist that Americans never hear. George wasn't hungry for war. He was mocked in Britain with the nickname Farmer George. Why? Because he loved farming. He spent hours experimenting with crops, breeding cattle, even writing manuals on agriculture, while propaganda painted him as a bloodthirsty oppressor. George was literally out in the fields, dirt under his fingernails. His enemies saw weakness in that butt-dozentee. It'd make him sound more like a frustrated hobbyist than a tyrant. And unlike most kings, George wasn't chasing women, scandals, or mistresses. He adored his wife, Queen Charlotte, faithful until the end. Together, they had 15 children and he was a present father, something almost unheard of among royals. Imagine this, the man American rebels cursed as a monster, kneeling to play with his children on palace floors. Doesn't match the villain poster, does it? Now, let's talk about his treasures. You'd think a king would fill his palace with gold, jewels, priceless art. George's collection was different. He wanted telescopes, microscopes, and books. His private library grew to more than 65,000 volumes, so massive it later became part of the British Museum. He personally funded scientists. In fact, during his reign, William Herschel discovered a brand new planet, Uranus, and who helped bankroll it? The so-called mad tyrant of America. But here's the part that truly flips the script. After the Revolution, after his empire slipped away, George III was asked about George Washington. Now, you'd expect bitterness. You'd expect venom. Instead, he said this: "If Washington does not seize power and become king himself, he will be the greatest man in the world." Read that again. The king Americans saw as their greatest enemy, quietly admired the man who defeated him. So let's put all this together. A king obsessed with colonial trade, yet never stepped foot there. A monarch mocked as mad, but maybe just sick in ways medicine couldn't explain. A supposed tyrant who nearly gave up his throne in despair. A ruler who loved farming more than fighting. A husband and father who was shockingly loyal in an age of royal scandals. A collector of books, not diamonds. A man who recognized greatness in the very leader who overthrew him. Does that sound like the cartoon villain history handed down? Or something more complicated? So here's the real question. Who was George III? Really? A tyrant who lost America? Or a misunderstood human being caught in the wrong moment of history? And maybe an even bigger question: if history books had told this story, would Americans still see him as the ultimate villain? What do you think?